So Lies of P is a Souls-like by NeoWiz, who I hadn't heard of before. It seems like they have made a lot of games. It's on all of the consoles and PC. I played it on Game Pass and ROG Ally, and it runs close to perfectly on both. I will say that playing this game on an ROG Ally in an airport at 60 frames per second and 120p on a handheld just felt amazing. It was when I really started to enjoy that handheld, I think, seeing that it was like having a current-gen console in your hands on the go. The game is pretty polished, actually. It's very, very impressive. I didn't find a single bug in my playthrough. There was really not much to report on that. It's a very complete game. It has had a major patch since the reviews came out. I'm playing it after that patch, which ameliorated some parts of the difficulty in the parry window and so forth. So I think I'm playing it at a good time, actually, like 6 months after release. How Long to Beat has this one at 30 to 60 hours based on how much of a completionist you want to be about it. I have played about 40 hours over the last month, and my playthrough has stalled at a point. I have not finished this game, and I will be talking about why in the review. On Metacritic, it has a respectable 80, and I think it is worth restating that these reviews dropped before a significant difficulty patch, and that was a factor in some of the reviews. They lengthened the parry window, and they rebalanced some of the damage that you take and deal. So I'd be very curious about what those scores might have been if they were on the contemporary version. Game Informer liked this one a lot and gave it a 95. They said Lies of P rewards and empowers you at every turn, despite its oppressive world and formidable enemies. I struggled to pull myself away from Lies of P, even when it had me fuming. Slant Magazine liked it less. They gave it a 6. They said the gleeful antagonism that Souls-likes generally direct at players is what drives many away from the genre altogether, making Lies of P a useful entry point for beginners. So a real mixed bag there. I think I would fall somewhere in the middle. I think for me it's like a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10. I broadly like this game, with some caveats. And the developers described this one by saying, Lies of P is a thrilling Souls-like that takes the story of Pinocchio and turns it on its head. Set against the darkly elegant backdrop of the Belle Epoque era, you are Geppetto's puppet caught in a web of lies. Unimaginable monsters and untrustworthy figures stand between you and the events that have befallen the stricken city of Krat. And my little capsule review of this one is that Lies of P is a deeply impressive Souls-like with tight combat, beautiful environments, and a nightmarish gothic horror worlds. It makes some welcome player-friendly tweaks to FromSoft's punishing formula, but is held back when it adheres to the genre's dogma. So I think that needs a little bit of context, my capsule review there. I mean, I will say, right at the top of this, I love this game. I think it's very good. It's a really, really polished game. It's a really, really impressive game. Strong mood, great combat, lots to love about it. But I played this one tentatively. I say that as someone who is not a huge fan of FromSoft's output, and I've had many, many critiques of it in the past. I'm not a FromSoft guy. The intentional oppressive difficulty and almost trolling of the player just grind my gears a little more than some people. I'm also not a particularly skilled player when it comes to these kind of games, so I do try them because I like a lot about them. I like dabbling in Souls-like games, but I have not finished one. The things that I like the tight, tense combat you get in these games. I like the blocking and circling, figuring out your build. I like the progression and leveling when it still feels meaningful, generally towards the start of these games. I like figuring out my own tactics, figuring out the build that I want to run with, finding my play style. And the more leeway there is in the game for that to happen, the more I like them. So I was a fan of Elden Ring and played quite a lot of it. And I did like this game. It does offer you a few varied routes to go down in building your character out. And I also like the complex levels that these games have. I like the level design. I like opening shortcuts. I like battling from checkpoint to checkpoint and doing spectacular boss fights that you really force your way through. But I also do have a lot of caveats and peeves with the FromSoft formula. Things like save point placement, grind when you are underpowered or underleveled, narrow parry windows that you have to hit or die basically, or enemies will just pound you into the ground, difficulty spikes, and they also recycle enemies a little bit too much for me sometimes. That is the reason that I fell off Elden Ring. was that I was fighting bosses for the third and fourth times, and I felt like the magic was wearing thin. There's a little bit of that in Lies of P as well. But I will say that Lies of P reins in some of the excesses that put me off the FromSoft Souls-like genre. It does add a whole bunch of quality of life changes and is somewhat more accessible in its patched form. But a lot of the dogma is still there. So it's always a bit of a push and pull with me and these style of games. But I got pretty far into Lies of P, and I am happy with what I played. So let's talk about it. So Lies of P is a gothic horror action game in the Souls-like formula. It's got a focus on atmosphere. It's got a lovely weather systems, pounding rain, and this beautiful gothic city that you come through. It's really thick with atmosphere, thick with foreboding in a way that I really liked. It's more linear than something like Elden Ring. It's perhaps related more to the Dark Souls-y part of the genre. People have compared it to Sekiro because of the focus on parrying, although it is more generous in that you can block in this game as well. You do a lot of leveling up, you figure out your build. There are very adaptable weapons and varied abilities that allow you to play in different ways, and it has very crunchy, precise melee combat that I really enjoyed throughout the game. The story has been a point of conversation about this one. It is a reimagining of Pinocchio, which might sound strange at first, but it's an old-fashioned dark fairy tale at its root, at its core. Jacob Geller, only today, the YouTuber Jacob Geller, if you don't follow him, please go and follow him. He's a voice worth hearing. He today posted an essay about the history of interpreting Pinocchio from the original texts through Disney, through Guillermo del Toro, through modern adaptations, and he delves into what the story is actually about in a really interesting way, and he does add Lies of P to that. So it is an interesting interpretation of a classic story that is very open to interpretation. And in this game we get to control Pinocchio, which is obviously changes the dynamic of the puppet, as we are the puppet master with our video game avatar. So this story reimagines Pinocchio in the city of Krat, a darkly beautiful city. It feels to me a little bit like somewhere like Prague. It has these pointed rooftops and vertical townhouses, wide piazzas. It is modelled on the, what did they call it again, the Belle Epoque era of France. So there's a lot of Art Deco around, lots of Gothic towers, lots of hulking hotels and museums of the future. Krat is a Renaissance city of steampunk technology with a Victorian sheen to it all. And that old-fashioned idea of progress, there's lots of robots in this town. You, as Pinocchio the puppet, are one of these robots. So there's a strong streak of retrofuturism to it, and the presentation of the game is a real selling point. It's absolutely fantastic to look at. The lightning flashes, the winding alleyways and streets, the buildings that you move through. It's a really vivid, really varied, really interesting setting. But when we arrive in Krat in the game, it's all fallen apart. So we see the wreckage of this city. The Krat that we see is a site of absolute devastation. And I would say that this game has an absolutely iconic beginning that I really love. I've been thinking about it a lot. I'm not sure why. But at the start of the game, Pinocchio, or P, is sitting in a train carriage, and a blue butterfly flies up to Pinocchio, travels into him and imbues him with life. Pinocchio stands up, and then we get control. And we walk down this beautiful old-style train carriage with tables, with passenger booths, with piles of books, with drinks. And we get to the end of the carriage, and there's a weapon for us to pick up. And then we step out onto the platform. It's really nice to step out onto a platform like you've arrived in the city from a train. And I had so many questions, like why was Pinocchio sitting in the back of this train? It's just intriguing. I really loved it. It had a really strong feeling to it of arrival. But out on the platform, we encounter the first puppets. They're less lifelike than Pinocchio. They are robotic train guards with little hats and metallic faces. And they've gone mental. They are not acting like they should. They should be, welcoming trains, guiding passengers, doing all of that kind of attendant stuff. But they're freaking out. They are beating things. They are mental. And there are bodies strewn all over the platform. So we intuit very quickly that the robots have been through a meltdown, and that we are coming for some reason, for some unknown reason, into this situation. Great beginning. I really liked it. I really liked emerging into the wreckage of the city that is Krat. And so the introductory section of the game, we just get through the train station, basically. We have to hack our way through a bunch of enemies. There are train guards, there are police robots, and there are posters and hangings, and we're coming through the tattered remains of this optimistic city of progress, and that in itself creates a lovely dynamism and tension. But the gameplay of the game is that you work your way through spaces. They are linear. They are gauntlets of corridors and stairways and halls packed with pretty vicious, hard-hitting enemies. In the Souls-like tradition, there are ambushes where you'll be tempted by a glowing thing and someone will come at you from the right, the classic Soulsy thing. There are traps. There are mini-bosses that are tougher than the story bosses in most cases, and secrets to find. But it is pretty linear, and I actually quite like that about the game. There's a little bit of room for exploration, little networks of streets sometimes, but it's all pretty linear. You're always on a track forward. And I think that kind of forge ahead system works really well for this game. I was never left questioning what my objective was. It's just move forward to the next place, which gives a welcome sense of drive in this game. Success in this game, to me, is just getting through one of those sections. You get through a gauntlet of enemies, you reach the next checkpoint, you get all your heals back, and that's enough progress. That means you've done good. You get to rest, you get to power up, you can fast travel from these campfires in Dark Souls, stargazers in this game. And at the end of each segment, there is a cinematic, climatic boss battle where you will face off against a larger enemy and then progress the story, open up a new area, and move forward. So most of the time in this game, you're running around looking at the details of this dark world, which is just engrossing. It's absolute chaos. There are human bodies everywhere. There are fallen puppets everywhere that have been smashed open. And in the remains, there are hounds, there are crazed robots, and you're battling through them all. So combat is really the main gameplay system of the game. Other than a little bit of light exploration and just sightseeing, you're going to be fighting an awful lot. And the combat in this game is really, really tight. I really enjoyed it. You have melee attacks. You have a light, a heavy, and a charged attack. You can guard and parry. If you land a perfect parry, which still has a pretty small window, I would say, even after the patch, it can stun an enemy. It can make an enemy flail. It can even break their weapon. So parrying is a big part of the game. You can also just block, though, which is a nice quality of life thing. So if you're not good at landing parries, you can just hold up your sword and block incoming attacks unless they are critical attacks, which are very well signaled, in which case you can roll out of the way. If you do guard and block, you take a little damage for every hit that comes in, but there's a great little system here called guard regen, where your health will go down just a little bit every time you take a hit and block, but then if you attack quickly enough, you can get that guard regen back. You can grasp back, claw back the health that you've lost by guarding. That's a really nice little system. The weapons that you use in this game are really interesting, a big part of the game. Each weapon is made up of 2 detachable parts. There is a hilt or a handle and a blade or a top. You can plug them apart when you find them in chests. You're always finding new weapons. I think I had 8 or 9 as far as I got to in the game. And you can recombine them. And this is really interesting because if you like, for example, the move set of a rapier, you can take the blade off the rapier and you will still maintain that move set, but you can attach something heavy hitting like a hammer top or a greatsword top or an axe top or a spear top and maintain the moveset that you like, but change the top of it. The different tops that you get can be blades that are imbued with elemental effects, like special weapons that have a longer reach or a shorter reach, that maybe change the speed. And so you really can customize your playstyle. But I will say that very early on in the game, I found something called the Fire Axe. It's just a very, very basic weapon, no special effects at all. It's mid-weight, it's heavy hitting. I fell in love with it straight away, and I used it for pretty much the entire game. It had a few attributes that I really like. For example, the charge attack of the Fire Axe lets you leap forwards pretty far and land a hit on the opponent, which is great for maintaining distance and then charging in. The Fire Axe also does pretty heavy hits. It ratchets up the stun meter pretty quickly. It will break enemies out of a swing pretty quickly and pretty often if you do a heavy blow. So that was the weapon for me, really. I did tinker around with some of the other ones. There's a really cool whip that extends in a big radius around you, but it made my character heavy. And so every weapon that I tried an acid spear as well, but I didn't quite like the moveset on that quite so much. I tried out the acid head on the axe handle, but I kept going back to the fire axe, and so that became my weapon for this game, my trusty axe. And I kind of liked that being canon for me, that I just found a fire axe as Pinocchio and used it throughout the entire experience of battling through Krat. There is also weapon degradation in this game. Now and then you have to use a grindstone to heal your weapon to bring it back to its full capacity. If it goes all the way down, it temporarily breaks until you use a grindstone. Sometimes the grindstone will add status effects if you have a special one, like a fire or acid or poison. So grindstones become a useful little thing to tinker with on your journey through the game. There are other weapons for you too. You have a legion arm. Pinocchio's left arm is detachable, and you can attach various devices to your left arm, including the puppet string, which is like a grapple that you can use to grab small enemies and pull them towards you, make them vulnerable and take them out. Or if it's a big enemy, it will draw you into them, so you can rocket into them and do a special attack. There is the full Minis arm, which is a shock attack, which gives status effects as well as damage. There is Flamberge, the flamethrower. There is a shield arm, which allows you to perfect parry and explode the enemy while you are blocking. There is a missile launcher, which became my default after a while, and a few others as well. All of these can be powered up with extra moves. They all have movesets, and there is a currency that you can power up your Legion arm with. You also have Fable. This is every time you land a hit, your Fable meter will go up. When it's at full, you can deliver a special attack. These are very, very useful because you get some precious iframes, and they involve dashing forward as well. So Fable attacks were really useful throughout the game. There are also throwables and consumables. You get random pickups when you kill enemies, such as grenades, fire bottles, electric bottles, poison bottles. And if you locked onto an enemy, you rarely miss with these. So they are very, very powerful. I would say that a good aspect of throwables is that if you get duplicates when you're out in the world, you can only carry 3 or 4 or 5 at a time. The duplicates will be sent back to your storage, and when you save, they will be replenished, which I love. Great quality of life feature. Bad side of it, they don't refresh when you die. So if you do a boss run and burn through all of your valuable thermite and cluster grenades, they are gone. So if you die in that fight, you don't get them back. You have to go and forage some more, which felt to me to be like an anti-quality of life feature. But I can understand it. They are very powerful, and you could base your whole playstyle around them. But it felt a little unfriendly. It felt a little unjust to me that you don't get them back when you die. It was kind of galling to lose all of your stuff on a boss fight, have to run to a shop, buy loads more, go back to the boss fight, just derailing the player and wasting time a little bit. There are also elemental and status effects in the game. They build up through exposure. So if you are hit by an electric enemy, you'll see a little meter on screen. When it maxes out, you start to suffer durational damage until that meter has gone down again. Same with fire, acid. There's even one called Disruption, which is not so much of a status effect as an instant kill. If Disruption maxes out, then you just straight die, which is an interesting choice. A couple other little bits and pieces. There is a cube that you get, a single-use item powered by a consumable that can offer you some health regen. So there's loads and loads of different systems in this game, loads of ways to customize your playstyle. There is also traditional leveling up and powering up. There are a couple of ways to power up throughout the game. You level up through XP or souls. In this game, they are called Ergo, reaped from fallen enemies. It has that corpse run thing where if you get killed, you have to run back to reclaim the Ergo that you were carrying at the time of your death. You can build craft by upgrading your health, your attack, your strength, your capacity, your legion power. So you can design your character. There's a pretty robust roleplay element to it. Weirdly, you have to go back to the hub area to power up, which pulled me out of the level sometimes. Like if you've got enough Ergo to power up, I would have loved to have been able to do that at a Stargazer, a save point, rather than taking myself out of the flow and going back to the hotel. Because if you press on with a level's worth of ergo, you're setting yourself up for some heartbreak, as I'm sure that Dark Souls players will identify with. Actually leveling up is very Soulsy in that you're looking at basically a confusing spreadsheet of, 25 different attributes. All of the different skills that you can choose will increase one of them or two of them or more, with pretty incremental increases most of the time. And at the start of the game, it really does matter. Like if you can upgrade your health or upgrade your attack, you feel it immediately. You feel more powerful. So I would say for the first 5-10 hours of this game, powering up was kind of a big deal. It really did feel like progress. But after a while, it stopped mattering so much. And so leveling became less of a factor, which I didn't like, really. I would say that if you're bashing your head against a boss, then being able to go away and level up and come back stronger is cool. In this game, it felt like you just have to grind it out because you're not going to get that much stronger by powering up anymore. I would also say that the Souls-like spreadsheet-based approach to leveling up is a little much. It's like you're looking under the hood, looking at all the stats that are grinding away behind the veil of how the game works. I think I would prefer like a UX layer that simplifies it all a little bit. And I get that people like the granularity of build crafting, but I think it could be more digestible, just maybe a personal preference for me. I mean, I'm 40 hours into the game and I still couldn't confidently tell you the difference between motivity and advance. Like I've powered both of them up 10 times. I'm not entirely sure what they do. I've just been squinting at these little numbers going up. So I stopped picking carefully after a while, and I think because of the impact of them mattered less. Like I just sort of, picked one. You can also power up in different ways. Pinocchio has a mechanical heart, and using quartz, which is a rare pickup, you can power up your abilities. These range from indispensable stuff, like an additional health flask, which can change everything, or making your health flasks heal you for more energy. Very important, so useful. To the, I would say, obscurely incremental, like slightly raising the amount of health that you can get back from guard regen. You can also power up your Legion arm using a different currency called a Legion Caliber, and it makes your arm have more utility. These are actually pretty impactful gameplay implications. For example, with the missile launcher, you have to freeze on the spot while you're aiming, but if you power it up, you can walk whilst aiming, which is invaluable in the heat of battle. So loads of ways to power up in the game, and I think that Souls-like players will be very satisfied with the range of customizability that you can bring to Pinocchio in this game. As for the story, I mean, there is a complement of characters all taken from Pinocchio, but only really as motifs. Like we have Geppetto, the creator of Pinocchio, and ostensibly your father. He's one of the first characters that we meet. We rescue him, and we battle our way through the downtown area outside of the station, and we get to Hotel Krat, this hulking hotel in this broken city, where there are still a few people who are alive. They've managed to seal the doors. They've managed to keep out the craziness that's going on in the streets outside. And as you meet more characters, they will congregate there. So you build out this interesting cast of characters. Geppetto is there. He's like a mild-mannered, top-hatted, white-bearded scientist, but he's not the Geppetto that we know from Disney, that's for sure. He seems aloof. He seems slightly strange, and he has a slightly kind of toxic-seeming, assumed father-son relationship with P. He will often say how important we are to him, and then send us into the direst danger, which makes me question Geppetto. There is also Vanini, an inventor, who will go and rescue from a factory area, and he will help us upgrade with new inventions. There is a mysterious old lady. There is a mysterious younger lady who we power up with, who has blue hair and is possibly the blue fairy figure in this game. There is a butler robot who is unaffected by the robot craze. There is a blacksmith. So plenty of people to talk to. There's a couple of dummies there, so you can change weapons and practice them, see if you like them before you go back out into the world. It is a cozy little hub, but it's also strange, cold, odd, full of odd people, a little bit like the Hold the Round Table Hold and Elden Ring. Lots of people there, but not much milk of human kindness, you could say. It's a very chilly atmosphere. You will also meet field NPCs who will offer you side quests, whether they're just survivors or whether they are other stalkers. Pinocchio in this game is a stalker, a warrior, an enforcer, a vigilante. We'll meet other stalkers out in the field. Some of them wear animal masks, which is pretty funny. It's a reference to the original Pinocchio mythology. We'll meet a mad donkey man. There's a guy that has a hound mask, a fox mask, a cat mask. There is also Jiminy Cricket, who in this game is a little machine that you carry around who will sometimes talk to you when you enter a new area and explain what the significance of the area is. So it does draw on all of that Pinocchio imagery, but it just reworks it in a very intense way. So it's really just visual cues that give you that colour of the story. And I do want to pour a bit of praise on the different areas that you go through in this game. After you've gone through the streets outside of the station to Hotel Krat, there are a few different districts of the city, some more run-down, some more grand and wealthy. There is a factory that you will go into with industrial robots. There is a grand exhibition, which is like almost like Bioshocky sort of technology of the future kind of exhibition that you'll run through. There is a swampy area. So lots of different varied areas, all with their own visual personality. I really liked moving through the city of Krat. It does feel like a big character in the game. It is a super memorable, super vibey place. The day-night cycle will change from area to area. So it's like nighttime or rain or dawn, and it gives each area a different atmosphere. And there are a few parallel stories going on. There is the robot breakdown, which is the initial emergency that we're dealing with, but there is also a plague going on amongst the populace. And there is a tangled story of how these things are interconnected, the politics of the city, what is going on with the ergo energy that comes from life forms and powers the robots. Has it become polluted somehow? All of this kind of thing. So there is a tangled story there. It's more clearly told than a FromSoft game, but still somewhat opaque unless you are feeling like you're going to be filling a notebook as you are playing and trying to piece it all together. And I think it's time to talk about like my general experience with this game, because I really liked the game. And when I first started it, I thought, I'm going to play it just to experience it. I'm probably going to hit a wall pretty quickly because it is, at the time when it came out, it was an infamously difficult new Souls-like game. So I skipped it, but then eventually I thought, well, at least I'm going to put my head in the door. Let's just see how far I get. And I was pleasantly surprised by my initial progress. I got through the first boss, I think, in 3 or 4 goes. The parry felt good. You were able to sort of pick different weapons, power up, all of that sort of stuff. And that carried on, like the second, third, fourth bosses of the game. It's all like 3 to 10 tries. The second boss I got first time. A couple of bosses I got on the second go. And I was thinking, maybe this is my Souls-like. Maybe this is the one for me. But there was a point at which that feeling dried up. And I lost a little bit of fascination with this game that I'm very, very impressed by. And it was that point where leveling up stops feeling meaningful. So you've become about as powerful as you're going to get. And the difficulty started to ramp in a way that made me feel like I was running behind it a little. Enemies started to be recycled at a point, so the game started to feel a little repetitive. This is a problem I had with Elden Ring, when I fought like a giant deer god, and I thought, wow, that's a really memorable encounter. But then you'll fight that deer god 2 more times, and it just cheapens it and diminishes it a little bit. And I was very impressed at first that Lies of P didn't fall into that trap, and a mini-boss is just a mini-boss, you never see it again. A boss is just a boss, you never see it again. But then by the 6th and 7th levels, we're getting mini-bosses just thrown into the landscape. They're populating the levels of the game with enemies that we've seen already. So I started to lose enthusiasm, and those were some of the most grating fights of the game as well. There's mini-bosses, and so by level 7 you're just battling through many, many difficult enemies that you fought already and whose movesets you know, and it started to feel like a little bit of a grind for me. So I ran out of steam in Act 7 of the game at about 70% completion, and I got a good experience. I enjoyed what I played, but as I tend to with Souls-like games, if they recycle enemies and if the level curve drops off, then I just hit a point where it starts to feel more like effort than enjoyment. So that's a point that I hit with Lies of P, and that is when I retired my playthrough in the 7th area. I will say that another reason that I didn't push on through is that I felt that the story in this game lost its way just a little. The initial robot revolution storyline was very intriguing, but some of the elements that came in about the plague and what kicked these events off felt a little bit more cliched to me. I felt like the story stumbled as the game went on. And whilst I would have liked to see those later levels, it was diminishing returns, which is a common personal response that I have to Souls-like games. So to go through some of the good and bad points, the upsides and downsides, I would say the good sides, the setting of the city of Krat is amazing. It is memorable. I will not forget it. The graphics are wonderful. It ran so smoothly and so well, and the art style is so good. The gothic Art Deco feel of it all, the lightning flashes, also dramatic, also enticing, so mesmerizing in a way. I really like the combat. It's sharp, crisp, responsive. I like that there are quality of life offerings to the player, such as blocking, the guard regen. The parry window was, I'd say I was getting like 60% of the time, which allowed me to get through a lot of bosses pretty well. You do have a fighting chance in this game. You don't have to parry to win. You can also dodge roll. You can also block. There are strategies that you can employ to make it work for you. I would say that it makes that Souls-like formula better in several ways. The enemies felt less spongy. There were less cheap deaths. There was a visual signal on screen when you have enough souls to level up. Your ergo counter turns blue, so you know that the stakes have just raised and you should maybe go and level up if you want to. You can also just beam back to the hotel at any point to level up if that is important to you. Being able to earn back a healing flask when you've run out of healing flasks by landing enough hits, like an emergency one, adds like a lifeline in difficult battles. That's a really good quality of life improvement. They've done some really good stuff to the formula here. The bosses are great too. They aren't these devastating wars of attrition like in Elden Ring, with unfathomable movesets that you have to work your way through. You can figure out these bosses. They have 3, 4, 5 moves. You get your tactics. They have a couple different phases. You can get through them. It's manageable, and you can spec your character out to make sure that you are in the right place to be able to take them on. Very cool. There is a summon mirror before every major boss, which I really like too. You get a little AI buddy who will fight their darndest. They will aggro the boss away from you, which can really give you a moment to heal or to use throwables. So I really like that concession to the player as well. I would say this is the most approachable and overall the most enjoyable Souls-like that I've tried. As for the bad stuff, there are big difficulty spikes in the game. Given everything that I've said, like where I got up to, I felt like I had finally just run out of steam, run out of enthusiasm. The mini-bosses are for some reason harder than the story bosses, and they are sometimes really ungenerously placed right before a save point. It would be so nice, it would be so easy to put the save point before a difficult mini-boss, so you don't have to schlep through 10 minutes of gameplay to get back to a mini-boss, but for some reason, the save point is always behind the mini-boss. It's just a real punishment for the player. You really lose a lot of progress, and you have to repeat a lot of gameplay. Just not into that really. So the save points are a little bit patchy. I would say that from the mid-game onwards, the Stargazers get further apart, which annoyed me because in the early game I was really enjoying being able to battle through to the next Stargazer. I feel like I was making progress. In the late game, they just get really far apart, so it's just a much more grueling section of gameplay. Some of the advice that I get is just run past all of the enemies. But at that point, I tend to think like, what are we doing here exactly? There are all these enemies here. I'm just running past them, trying not to die. Is this really what this game is? Is this the intended experience? There are also some sections where you run over rafters. They are slippery. You will fall down. You'll get fall deaths. A bit frustrating. And maybe a few too many systems, like the cube that you get that needs to have gold tree seeds, but the tree only gives you new seeds for every 20 minutes of in-game time. And the effects of the cube are not that excellent, really. It's a little boon in a boss fight, but that's it. So I felt like perhaps there are a few too many systems squeezed in here, and perhaps if it had been streamlined a little, there's a bit of low-hanging fruit here, in my opinion, in terms of the systems that are available. And finally, the story. It's clearer than other FromSoft games. I mean, I still think that Elden Ring's story is a catastrophic misstep that doesn't really tell you a story. It's just lost in the details. It's been exploded into so many parts that the thrust is gone. I would say in this game it is a lot clearer than that, but it still does take missteps. There were some sections of the game where I didn't quite know what my goal was. Even after beating an area's boss, I just knew that I had to move forward. And that's a shame. I think I would have felt more invested and perhaps pushed on harder had the story had a little bit of a tighter, been more tightly braided, so I always knew what I was doing, so I always knew where I was going. The plot itself fades in the back half of the game, I would say. The robot revolt is awesome, perfect, and Krat is such a compelling hellscape with all these butler and cleaner and police robots just turned against you. But the second half, there is a new strand that is introduced that lost me a little bit, felt a little bit Marvel movie in a bad way. So that was my experience with Lies of P. I think it is impressive. I enjoyed my time with it. But my personal take on Souls-like games is that the formula is just a hard thing to grapple with. I've never quite found a way to love these games. I admire them, I play them, I take what I can, and then I hit a point where my steam runs out and I move on. And I will say that I think I have a philosophical difference on these kind of games. I believe in making games playable for everyone. I believe in, for example, I've been playing the Prince of Persia game the last couple of days, and it has so many sliders, enemy health, enemy damage, the parry window, aim assist for the bow, so many things, and I tweaked it just a little bit and had such a better time afterwards. And I understand that there's a whole philosophy around these games, but I stand in opposition to the philosophy of Souls-likes. It doesn't do any damage to let everyone play it. It works both ways. You have players who want it to be harder. They can push the difficulty up. They can ramp it even higher. You have players who want to be able to parry a little easier and just move through the game, then let them. None of the Souls-likes that I've played do that. Lies of P does not do that. And so whilst I admire the game and enjoyed the game, and there are lots of things to enjoy about it, especially the craft of the music, the atmosphere, the environment, it's a hard game to love just because of the genre that it's in. And that is my take on Lies of P. So I hope you enjoyed that episode. Lies of P, really fun game. I should mention it is on Game Pass. So if you would like to play it and you have an Xbox, you can play it for free and just try it out. I would like to hear from people who have played Lies of P. How did you find the experience? From seasoned Souls-like people or from newcomers? Let me know. I'm on social media as Gaming in the Wild, on Twitter, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. I do also sometimes post videos of the podcast. So if you are on YouTube, do come and find the Gaming in the Wild channel, and there will occasionally be visual versions where you can watch gameplay footage. Not every week, it does take an extra few hours, so it just depends on how much time I have week to week. There is also, of course, the Patreon. If you would like to support this podcast, get bonus episodes about off-topic things, and join the Discord community, find that at patreon.com/gaminginthewild. It's only $1 a month at the lowest level, and you're welcome. So come join us if you enjoy the show. Also, leaving reviews, retweeting show announcements, sharing it with a friend, just sending it to someone who likes a game that I've talked about or likes video game podcasts, all really appreciated. It all helps the show to grow and to continue and to spread. And I love watching those numbers go up as a gamer, as a podcaster. I love to see those numbers go up, and I love to see people enjoying it. So thank you very much for listening. Please do come back next week. Take care of yourselves and each other, and bye-bye for now.